Big Podcast.
All right, I'm going to give you a podcasting trick, and that is if you want an easy way to get better at podcasting, buy better stuff, buy more stuff, buy expensive stuff. No, I'm kidding. We're going to talk more about that on this episode. It's Build a Big Podcast, the marketing podcast for podcasters. If you want to grow your audience, if you want to make impact with your message, if you want a better podcast, if you want to make more money with your podcast, if you want to make a podcast that makes your mother proud, this is the podcast for you. Bigpodcast.com. That's the website. My name is David Hooper. This episode, the audio edition of my weekly newsletter that is called Big Podcast Insider. You can find it at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. This is issue number 209. I'm recording this in a little bit of a different way than I normally do. That is because I wanted the cheapest way possible for me to record this. Just as an example, that everything I'm going to talk about today, all this equipment and the opportunities that you have right now because of holiday sales, year-end sales, and hype on podcasting gear, you really don't need it. I'm talking into a $99 mic right now. It's a Shure SM58. It's a classic mic, millions sold every year. The number one mic ever. Still $99. It's been $99 for, 30 years or so. I'm going into a Vocaster 1 interface by Focusrite, and that right now, about $60. So we're talking $160. This episode recorded and edited with Adobe Audition. You pay by the month, $35 a month. By a year at a time, $22 a month. But Audacity, that's for free. But Audacity, that's my go-to. That's free. The point I am making is that you do not need a lot of stuff, and especially not a lot of expensive stuff, to make a good podcast episode. Here's what we're covering on this issue. One, the topic that I'm talking about right now. Do you need any of this stuff? I've got some inexpensive tool recommendations. One, it's an alternative to Canva. It's going to cost you less than $100. Another, if you want to do a podcast promotion in a visual way, this thing's very cool. Under $20. A free tool for guest agreements, meaning guests know what they're getting into. They give you legal permission to use their recordings. They don't come back later and say, hey, can you please take that down? Or maybe they do, but you don't have to feel guilty about it, whether you do or not, because you've got an agreement with them. Again, letting them know what they've gotten into. I'm going to do this one a little bit differently than I normally do. I'm going to talk about some of the tools that you can get, all of them under $100, a lot of them under $50, that will make your podcast better. But again, do you need them? You need a good mic, you need a good interface, and you need a way to record yourself. And that way to record yourself, if you're using Audacity, we're going to go a little bit deeper into that. Don't feel any pressure like I'm going to try to sell you a bunch of stuff. I am not, except for right now. This episode of Build a Big Podcast brought to you by Riverside.fm, a very easy solution for both you and your guest. A lot of the tools that I'm talking about on this episode, you're going to find that they do one thing. Riverside, it is an all-in-one tool for recording, for AI episode promotion, for editing. It makes everything so easy. One low monthly payment. I'm going to tell you how to try it for free in just a second. It handles a lot of the stuff that you used to have to buy multiple tools for. One, remote interviews. You're going to sound like you're in the next room. Two, AI magic clips. That's what they call it. It goes through your long form video. It goes through your long form audio. It finds the clips that it thinks are most interesting to listeners, chops them up for you, gives them to you, ready for you to put on your social media platforms so you can go out, promote your podcast, get people back to the full podcast that you've recorded with Riverside. It makes editing a breeze. Automatic transcriptions are included. A lot of things A to Z, from recording to editing to marketing your podcast. Told you can try it for free. This is how to do it. Go to riverside.fm, sign up for a free account. They're going to give you a couple of hours to look at it, use it, see what you think about it. A couple of hours is enough time for you to do an interview, maybe 2 interviews. And these are multi-track interviews. You can get as many people as you can fit on there. 5, 10 people, you could do it. I'd say 1 or 2, make your editing a little bit easier. But Riverside can handle it. Multiple people, regardless of where they are in the world. They'll sound like they're in the same room with you. If you want to stick around, I've got a discount code for you. This is going to get you 15% off. Again, you go to riverside.fm, get that free account, and the discount code if you want to stick around, Big Podcast, BIGPODCAST. That's riverside.fm, the discount code, Big Podcast, BIGPODCAST. Normally on these episodes, I go from thing to thing to thing. You hear a demarcation point, something like this. That lets you know that if you want more information, you can go to newsletter.bigpodcast.com. You can get more information. You can get links to what I'm talking about. And you can still do that on this episode. Again, all the links, newsletter.bigpodcast.com. But I'm going to do this in a little bit of a different way because more or less what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get you thinking about what it is that you need, what it is that you don't need, keeping your podcast something where you're working on your skill set, not just equipment acquisition, because equipment acquisition, that's one of the things that can go against you being a better podcaster. Let me tell you why. You buy stuff, and you think, oh, this is going to solve my problems. This is going to make me sound better. This is going to do my editing for me. This is mean I don't have to worry about mic placement. And that's not true. I heard a story, and I think this was actually the Slayer drummer. You know Slayer? I'm going somewhere with this. He was talking about recording in a studio, and recording in a studio for music is much like recording in a studio for podcasting or radio. You want to get a great performance on tape. Then what you can do is make it even better through editing. And drummers, if you think about a metronome, click, 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 click. Without that, bands will tend to speed up or slow down. The drummer is setting the pace for a recording. He was talking about working with a drummer, a newer drummer. He said, you're working with these new drummers. They're not used to working with a click. They're not used to being that precise. They say, oh, can't you just fix it? They call it putting on the grid. Could you just put it on the grid where they basically have an AI tool or something like an AI tool that takes a little bit of a funky meter and puts it right on the beat? And he said, man, you got to understand, you need to be able to do this without having something that snaps to the grid. And I would tell you this as a podcaster, there's no doubt that great podcasts are made in the edit, but you want to have the best performance possible that you can get on your raw tape. You want to be able to read without making too many mistakes. You want to be able to ask questions without or filler words or something that's going to take away from your message or away from the question that you're asking or away from you being heard by a guest or listeners. You want to be able to do this stuff live, and you want to be able to do this stuff raw without a lot of help. You might have heard car ads on the radio. Hey, come on down to Bob Friendly Kia. If you got a pay stub, we're going to get you in a Kia. It's really hyped up, and at the end, there's going to be an announcer type voice, super quick with terms of the deal, percentage rates, legal elements, fine details just to cover these guys. I asked my voiceover instructor about this. I said, what are they doing? Are they speeding this up? He said, no, they actually do it. There's not enough time to speed it up. Some of these guys, they're just cranking these things out day after day after day, and studio time's expensive. Tape is expensive. Now, it's a little bit easier now, and you will hear some of these things being sped up. It's obvious. It's not what it used to be. But back in the day, you had to get really good. And that's why I bring this up, just like the drummer from Slayer. Old school band, back in the day, you had to be that good, and you can be that good. There are some tools. They are going to allow you to make mistakes. They're going to allow you a little more forgiveness when it comes to that original recording. And thank God for it. I'm certainly not a perfect host. Everything that you hear from me is edited, and everything that you do should be edited. But to save your time or save your editor's time and to put yourself in good situations where you have opportunities, you need to get good. So that's the big point of this episode. Do you need any of this stuff that I'm going to talk about here? No, you don't. No, solid mic and an interface, that is all you need. Again, I'm going into a $99 mic, Shure SM58. If you want a link to that and all the other stuff that I'm talking about, newsletter.bigpodcast.com. The interface, the Focusrite Vocaster 1. This thing is great. Super simple. It handles one mic, and for something like this, a monologue or where you're doing interviews that are remote, nobody's in the same room with you, perfect. $60 right now, not a bad deal. Again, newsletter.bigpodcast.com if you want that. By the way, if you've got questions about the right tools, feel free to reach out to me. Blue Sky is the best way to do that right now. I've got a link to my profile. It's at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. Hey, before I get into it, I do want to talk about how to build your skills. If you're interested in working with me one-on-one, you like the newsletter, you like this podcast, I've got something called Big Podcast AMP, A-M-P. That's audio monetization program. It's a personal coaching program. It's going to help you do three things. One, grow your podcast audience. Two, get people talking about your podcast. And three, make more money with your podcast and your podcasting skills. I've got the details at bigpodcast.com/amp. That's bigpodcast.com/AMP. I'm going to work with you on your skills. If you need advice on equipment, yeah, I can help you with that too. But I'm not trying to get you to go out and buy a bunch of stuff. I'm trying to get you better so you can walk into a situation. And this is going to happen when you start picking up gigs, remote situations, studio situations, field situations, being on the road, doing something live from a conference maybe. You're going to be connected with different types of equipment than you normally use. And I want you to sound your best. I want you to be able to give a great episode, beginning, middle, and an end that meets your needs, that meets clients' needs if you're bringing in outside clients, and makes you money. Again, it's called Big Podcast AMP. Audio monetization program. You can find out more. bigpodcast.com/AMP, bigpodcast.com/AMP. Send people to your podcast with a $10 keychain. Talk about inexpensive ways to market your podcast. I love this idea. It is a custom keychain. You can get it on Amazon for $10. I've got the link at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. It is a metal bar, 2, maybe 3 inches. Kind of looks like, I don't know, a necklace, but it's got a barcode on it. These are custom made, and the barcode is a link to your podcast on Spotify. So when you're talking up your podcast in your day-to-day life, I say, oh, podcast, huh? I've heard of those. Well, let me show you how to get it. Pull out your keychain, have them scan it. People have Spotify on their mobile phones. Spotify is a mobile-first program. They've already got everything installed. They scan that Spotify QR code from the keychain that you carry around with you all the time. You don't have to have business cards. You don't have to pull up a website. You don't have to tell them to go to a website. Just pull out your keychain. Say, oh, that's cool. They listen to it on the way home. They can listen to it right there. It is a very cool thing to do when you're out talking about your podcast. It is the next logical step because you want people to listen and they're interested right there. Get them to take action while they're hot. Under $10, worth a punt. You can get it on Amazon. I've got a link to it. Newsletter.bigpodcast.com. Part of marketing your podcast is your podcast graphics. People see you before they listen to you. And if they do listen to you, like the example that I just mentioned, you're in the grocery store, you're talking up your podcast, you pull out that barcode, they're seeing the graphic of your podcast before they're actually listening to it. You might have heard of Vistaprint. They print up a bunch of business cards. And I think that's why they're selling this for so cheap. It's really interesting. It feels like they've just copied the Canva interface. It's almost like it's the same backend. It works the exact same way. If you've used Canva, you're going to be able to use Vista Create. 70 million royalty-free images, vectors, videos, music files. If you want to put music behind social media promotions that you make with it, it can remove backgrounds from any image in seconds. It can replace backgrounds with images and leave them transparent. So if you want a PNG file that you can put on a white background, black background, red background, you can do it. That's worth a lot right there. I know background tools that charge monthly for those services. You can turn images into stickers. You can tweak the sizing. So if you've got an Instagram image and you want to make a LinkedIn image, it can do that automatically. Make a Facebook image, it does it automatically. You can change the text on your design. It has brand kits. It's very cool. Is it as good as Canva? Yeah, it's about 80%. It's definitely a bargain for the one-time fee. It's $89 right now. So under $100 gets you a lifetime of this Canva alternative. It is good enough, in my opinion, that if you ever did need to go to Canva for a couple of things, you could get away with the free Canva option. You're not going to have to pay for Canva. It can handle anything you need related to your podcast. You can check it out. Take it for a spin. I've got a link, newsletter.bigpodcast.com. I've got a cool tool here. It is called Pod C. I love this thing. It takes your podcast audio. It gives you a summary. It gives you a transcript. That's not that special, but what is special about it, it gives you a mind map. And a mind map, if you're not familiar with that, to describe it would be, let's say the topic is podcasting, like this podcast, and it draws an arrow to microphones, which I've talked about. It draws an arrow to interfaces. And then from microphones, it's going to talk about the different microphones that I've talked about, the SM58, for example. From the interface, it's going to talk about the Vocaster One. So it gives you this visual representation of the audio you've recorded, and it makes a cool social media graphic. It makes a cool graphic for your blog post. It's just cool. And it's only $19. It's going to get you attention for your podcast, and it's going to make your podcast easier for people to find what they want. What I mean by that, I mentioned the SM58. If I'm talking about that, you click on that mind map, and it takes you right to the point in the episode where I'm talking about the SM58. So it's almost like an old school glossary. It's a nice tool. It's going to help people interact with your podcast in a new way. Only $19. I've got it linked. Newsletter.bigpodcast.com. I've got a guest agreement tool for you. This is free. When I talk about guest agreements, I make guests agree to 3 things. 1, to show up with a quality mic, not a phone headset, not a built-in computer mic. 2, I want guests to show up from a quiet place where we can focus on getting a good interview recorded without distractions. I don't want somebody washing dishes in the background. I've had it happen. I don't want somebody connecting to the remote interview from a Starbucks. Had it happen. Somebody connecting from a car. No. You want to have it in writing that that person's going to be connecting to your session from a quiet place. People don't know. They're used to doing Zoom calls whenever and wherever. I see people in the grocery doing Zoom calls. Hey, everybody, or FaceTime something. Hey, oh, look, they're shopping. They can't focus on what you need when they're shopping and when they're doing other thing else. And you would think that that would be obvious, but it is not. So you want to have this in writing. Also acknowledge in writing that all interviews for your podcast are edited. Not maybe edited, they will be edited, and that you're not going to send edits for approval. That's what I suggest. And if you're worried about legalities of recording, by the way, this is a great way to make sure that gets taken care of. Sometimes you'll have people come back to you. And if you haven't had this happen, you will have it happen if you do enough interviews. Well, I kind of wish you'd take it down. I'm not really doing that anymore. I said something embarrassing, or I didn't like the edit. And that's fine. If somebody comes to me and say, I want to take that down, I say, okay, cool. Here's the issue though. Once it's out into the world, I can't go after it. I can take it off my server where it's not distributed via me, but who knows who's distributing it? I have people copy my podcast all the time. I actually got on Spotify the other day. This is hard to believe. Somebody had taken this podcast, and I know who it is. There were a couple of major hosting companies that I had issue with one of them once, trying to have me listed as one of this company's podcasts. It used to be on Apple Podcast. I guess it was kind of like a network. You could click on a network and you would see all the podcasts that people were responsible for. And having a popular podcast, somebody, and I trusted this person, in the business, took my podcast and listed it under his company. I said, whoa, man, you're throwing me off, bro. You're taking this audience, people are searching for my podcast, and you're splitting it. I understand the association. You want to be associated with me? And if you want to be associated with me, that's fine. We can talk about a sponsorship deal, but it's not going to work like this. Anyway, the point is this. Just last week, these guys were back again. My podcast was listed on Spotify 5 extra times. Not a big deal to take care of it, but a deal. And if you've got somebody coming back to you that is upset that an episode got released, or somebody's in there talking about meat and they become a vegetarian, or somebody's talking about devil worship and they become a Christian, whatever, there's a lot of things that can happen. Even if you take those episodes down from your end, those episodes are still out there. It's nice to have it in writing. Really what it does is just clarifies things. So you don't hear one thing and that person hears another thing. Anyway, a guest agreement tool, it is free, very easy to use. It'll save you a lot of headache. I've got it linked, newsletter.bigpodcast.com. What's your audience searching for? When you know this, you're going to open up a lot of new opportunities as far as the episodes that you create, as far as the guests that you bring in, as far as attracting an audience. People are searching for what you do, and there's plenty of traffic to be had. But you've got to give it to these people in the way that they are looking for it. For example, let's keep it on the subject of podcasting. Podcasting, one word. It's not what somebody's searching for. How to start a podcast? Maybe. How to start a podcast under $100? Yeah. A lot of people are doing that. That would be a good episode. That would be a good blog post. How to start a podcast with $500? Also good. This is a tool that will help you make that happen. Finding out what the people that you want to listen to your podcast are searching for so you can bring them into your podcast. I've got it linked. It's at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. 500,000 journalists, 200,000 podcasts. In fact, this tool has over 2 million journalists, publishers, and podcasts. You can find email addresses, phone numbers, topics of interest. Let's say you're talking about yoga on your podcast. There are journalists, all they do is cover yoga. It'd be a good connection for you, maybe a good guest for you. And again, you get the info, email addresses, phone numbers, publisher info. Let me break down these databases for you. I talked about 2 million, 500,000 journalist profiles, 150,000 media publishers, 200,000 podcasts. If you want to release a press release, you can do it. If you want to export contact lists, you can do it. If you're looking for more press for your podcast or whatever you're doing, this is a good opportunity. If you're looking for more podcast interviews, either as a host where you're interviewing somebody or as a guest where other people are interviewing you, this is a tool that will do it. I've got it linked at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. Always in every newsletter, I try to throw in a little bit of humor, a lot of times a meme. I feel podcasters, we've got to laugh at ourselves because sometimes the stuff that we see in podcasting, including the stuff that we do ourselves, is ridiculous. And there's a woman in a hotel. She's checking in. She says, "Can you give me a wake-up call?" The hotel clerk, she says, "You're not that good at hosting. You need to edit. How's that?" So consider this a podcasting wake-up call. I talked about this at the top of the issue. Good equipment is nice, but it's skills that make a podcaster great. A great host, somebody who can really connect with a guest, is going to be able to do it on the equipment that I've got. A basic mic, $99. A basic interface, something that powers the mic, gets the signal into the computer where you can record it, $60 in this case. It is your skills that make a difference in your podcast. If you are interested in having better skills, I've talked about bigpodcast.com/amp. I would love to work with you one-on-one and within a group with other podcasters that are working just as hard as you are. They're hard to find. There are a lot of people that talk about being podcasters, but yeah, they talk about being podcasters. They don't actually podcast. If you want to connect with people that are actually podcasting, bigpodcast.com/amp. That is the website. If you want more from me, let's talk about how to subscribe to this podcast. Go to bigpodcast.com. That's where everything is, how to subscribe to this podcast, how to get the newsletter. I've got a free podcast toolkit that'll help you grow your audience. I got a lot of stuff for you as a podcaster to grow your audience, to get more people to your podcast, to make a better podcast, make a podcast that has impact, make a podcast that makes you money, all that at bigpodcast.com. Go there now before you forget, bigpodcast.com. And if you're ready for more, bigpodcast.com/AMP. Thank you very much for listening. And I'll see you on the next episode of Build a Big Podcast.